Hello and welcome to Dynamic Digi. I want to speak briefly on the notion of will the UK enter a recession very soon? Um, I know I made a video about this, but there are just some additional points I want to reference. Um, Now, economics is an inexact science. I think that is generally perceived to be common knowledge because it's a fact. There's so many variables that go into economic analysis and can affect economic decision making and the nature of how goods and services are utilized and produced. However, I would argue, even amidst that, um, the likelihood of a recession certainly has increased, though I just want to offer some points on how we could utilize this to its fullest advantage. That is, what do we need to do to try and boost ourselves in a post-recessionary phase? As I said, I'm not an academic economist. I'm not an economist at all, but these are just my views nonetheless with regard to that. I would argue that utilizing new trade agreements, I see Australia is looking to utilize or to formulate a trade agreement as soon as possible, which is beneficial, of course. But I believe that if we can lay a path in which we have the ability to trade with others, the ability to secure investment elsewhere and internally, I think generally we actually should have more trade agreements with developing emerging economies more so than advanced ones like Australia, because they're the ones with the potential for growth. Much was said in the campaign that EU GDP has fallen vis-a-vis world GDP levels. Well, this is not the EU's fault, certainly over the past 20, 30 years, because as countries like China are developing, India, it's inevitable that this would happen. So this cannot be blamed per se on the European Union. It's just, let's put it this way. The writing is on the wall, in my opinion, on the end of Western geopolitical dominance. That has been the norm, that has been the status quo literally for the past 500 years, ever since the first, Portuguese missions to trade were Infante Henry the Navigator. Yeah, that was about 500 years ago. So yes, it's inevitable that would have happened. That as China has progressed, then and India and other regions of the world, Africa, South America, that the West's share of global GDP will inevitably fall. One has to note, and I'm going on a bit of a tangent. One also has to note that prior to Western geopolitical dominance, the world was generally balanced between Europe and the Middle East, some African kingdoms, Indian kingdoms, the Chinese dynasties, the Incas, the Aztecs, the Mayans. So really, Western geopolitical dominance has been an aberration compared to much of recorded human history anyway. So, as frankly, we have to be honest, other regions of the world, apart from the developed world, as we would call it, are the future. I think there has to be a skew towards deals with China, deals with India, even deals with, say, specific African countries like South Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, with the Caribbean, with Brazil, with Argentina. more so than, say, the United States, Canada, the EU, Australia. I'm not saying we should not do deals. Obviously, that's silly to say we should never do them. What I'm saying is that based on, well, let's put it this way. I think our future economic health would depend on areas where there's greater potential for growth, because any business wants to have a market that has potential for growth. More revenue, more sales, more profits, ultimately. And if growth, due to the rising middle class in India, in China, in African countries, in South America, even in parts of the Middle East, then this is all the better. So I do personally believe there will be a recession. I know the IMF has said there may not necessarily be one, but I think this quarter, the last quarter of this year, may be negative growth. And possibly by this time in 2017, we'll have some more or clearer positive economic growth. As for this time in 5 to 10 years, well, that's impossible to say. But we will see, and hopefully we should be able to weather this storm, which, let's hope, remains a very light storm. As for how the tech sector can benefit here, I think there are a number of ways. Firstly, I think if we do strike free trade agreements with, shall we say, a skew towards less developed countries or emergent markets, then that could help in terms of labour. That could help in terms of UK tech firms setting up bases in emerging markets to provide goods and services in those markets. It could also help in the development of standards, as many emerging markets still don't have pervasive internet. It could help in enabling them to do so. Obviously, the UK is a global leader, so we can utilize our strong position for that end. So, this is really part 2 of the first video I did, and this is just my opinion. As I say, I'm not an economist really. Though I do think there will be a recession, but I think our future growth has to be on how we forge trade deals and generally our global trading position and strategy. And I have confidence that Mrs. May and her government can succeed in that regard. So thank you very much, and thank you for listening.